Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Economics Design Podcast. My name is Ari Kimmelman. I'm a research analyst with Economics Design. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by my colleagues Kiefer Zhang and Enzo Martin to discuss innovative token designs in the blockchain gaming space. Enzo and Kiefer, do you guys want to briefly introduce yourselves?
Hey Ari, I'll start that off. I'm an associate consultant at Economics Design. I've been designing token systems in various senses since 2018, usually as a systems designer for a crypto racing game, then doing incentive design work for a company that built out some crypto casinos and an exchange. And now for a little bit over a year, I've been at Economics Design designing incentive systems and token designs for a pretty wide variety of Web3 games.
So hi guys, hi Ari, hi Kiefer, and to everyone's listening, my name is Enzo. I'm a junior associate consultant here at Economics Design. As for my background, I have a master's degree in economics and have been playing blockchain games since around 2021, but video games probably since the day I was born. I'm a big video game player, and in terms of my professional background, I previously worked as a business analyst and as an operations analyst in my prior companies. So yeah, I'm excited for this talk.
Awesome. So I would like to start off the conversation today by providing some context and briefly explaining what token design is. So token design refers to the rules of how tokens act within an ecosystem. This can include whether there's a single versus a dual token model, the type of token distribution method utilized in a game, to whom tokens are allocated to, whether staking is an included feature of that protocol, if there's a tax on buying and selling NFTs and where that revenue goes toward, and so on. So really what it is looking at the rules of how tokens circulate within an ecosystem to better understand where value is being captured and where value is being created. So my first question today is, what are some games that have unique or innovative token designs that either have been released or that are currently in development? And what qualities do they have that make them innovative?
So one that really stands out to me is Eden Brawl, and they've got a lot of interesting components, but one of them that I'll pick out is having a model that is a mix of some of these Web 2 and Web 3 aspects. And so they have a token that's getting the Web 3 component, but then also rather than doing a two-token model, bringing in a traditional hard currency as the other more active gameplay-focused token in that ecosystem. And then some other games that I think are doing something interesting are I'll call out two for roughly the same thing, Block Lords and Ascenders, in terms of having this sort of like asymmetric gameplay or differing roles within the economy where essentially different participants are engaging in different types of activities, and in doing so are creating an economy where they'll create some resources or some services that are then beneficial to people in a different role. And so you create this interactive economy that emphasizes the need for trade between these different types of participants. Just for some context, Block Lords, it's a medieval strategy game. So you have these different roles of the farmers producing food, knights doing kind of the defending or attacking, lord, and then a higher level of like lords and kings. And then on Ascender's side, there's kind of these split paths of fighters, explorers, and builders that are all doing these different things, but still need to interact with each other.
Yeah, and as most probably everyone knows, like the most common ones are the two token economy that Axie Infinity really popularized. But then I think that game also pivoted in a way that they're introducing off-chain currencies as well with their on-chain ones, and these off-chain currencies are seasonal. So I think that's an interesting aspect and then a nice change to them. I've seen games like Big Time focusing more on NFTs as their main earning mechanic, which are basically dropped from gameplay. Playton Arena does periodic burnings of their utility token. Forge Arena has various tokens that players acquire, and they could acquire through different activities within the game, but all are just inputs to their NFT generator. While this game called Undead Blocks has basically an off-chain stablecoin, which is pegged at 10 cents per golden Z-Box, I think, which is all are interesting takes on how to balance their economies. And of course, because these are different games and different genres of games, it will really depend on how they implement it to their specific genre.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think that because there's a combination and a couple different attempts to create a sustainable token design, it makes me wonder whether we're going to find one or two that end up working, or maybe multiple, depending on the type of game genre. I think it'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out across the next 5 years. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think there's going to be just a lot of creativity here. It's not necessarily that one particular model ends up being widely adopted, but more so that there will be perhaps a variety of different variations that are applicable to each particular project, because not all games are the same, not all game economies are the same, and it's really important to have something that fits that particular version and underlying goals.
Yeah, there's just to echo on Kiefer's part, it's not like a one-stop shop solution that's a blanket solution for all games. So if like one good example or something that I like to compare blockchain protocols to are countries, and of course each country has their own unique set of resources within their economies, and there's no one solution to balance each and every country. Like you have to create mechanisms in place in order to balance one particular economy depending on what resources you have, the political landscape, every agent or economic agent present inside the economy. So I think that's a similar aspect to games, where game developers of course would have a few models to base their economy on, but then it's really up to them on the different mechanisms that they create within their economy to help them balance it in the future.
I really like the analogy about kind of like running countries. It's a really nice way to think about things in the virtual space and these virtual economies. So I want to move on to a different question and learn from past mistakes. So I want to ask, what type of token designs have we seen in previous blockchain games that have been shown to be ineffective, and what were the implications of those failed designs?
Yeah, and so one of the biggest examples obviously is Axie, as that's what's gotten kind of the most widespread attention. And one of the components to pick out there is the SLP distribution, so the utility token there, based on kind of participation rather than skill, more so in the earlier iterations of the game, and that's. It doesn't create the most engaging experience, and not the most sustainable one either. But also trying to, in this scenario, you end up with a heavy focus on financial motivation for participating in this activity. And when you have that overly financial motivation for continued participation in this particular game economy, then you have a user base that's very reactive to any reduction in financial incentives.
It becomes a job, right? Like if you're really trying to play just to get tokens, it's more games that focus on tokens basically as their main earning mechanic become easily exploitable, because essentially community members will find a way, or bad actors will find a way to game the system and try to get as much tokens as they can. Like Kiefer pointed out, the distribution was more on the participation rather than skill in the early iterations of Axie. So I think that's a model that boomed at the start, but then we eventually saw the flaws because some other protocols like Pegaxi had a similar headache where they followed a similar model, but when mass adoption happened, that basically crashed their economy. The game wasn't ready basically for that mass adoption to happen, and with that mass adoption, mass extraction also happened.
Yeah, on the distribution side as well, it's in terms of looking at how that inflation is controlled. And so with the early Axie model, as well as like Steppen is another one that's looked at a lot. It's understanding like how is inflation controlled, and generally the constraint was at the level of each individual player. In terms of each player had a certain amount of energy or capability to produce tokens, but you're not actually restraining it at the overall economy level. So it's not very granular control over the actual inflation rate of the assets in the economy.
Kiefer mentioned that it was at the player level, but then once game developers have to keep in mind that once they adjust a certain aspect of their game, of course the economy will react. right? And something that happened within that the Axie ecosystem is when they tightened that SLP faucet. Of course, those who were benefiting from that system obviously reacted in a negative way, like, and that showed in SLP prices as well, in faith in the protocol or faith in the developers. Essentially, if you're a game developer, if you tweak something midway, you could almost always expect a reaction from the economy, and it might not be what you were expecting.
Yeah, but the reaction was especially bad just because they were in the scenario again of having an audience that's almost entirely kind of built around these value extracting type of participants. And yeah, so it's very important to understand like who the actual players are in the economy, what their motivations are, and if that actually lines up with what with the target audience that the team is really trying to cater to.
Yep, but it was a good way to like take out the weeds and quote unquote, right? To make sure that those that stayed in your economy are really the ones that you wanted to target.
I think it's interesting when we talk about incentives and really targeting the right people, because one of the issues we've seen in the blockchain gaming space is botting. And there's a recent statistic that came out that said that approximately on average 40% of participants in games, in these blockchain games, are bots. And that makes sense from an economics perspective, because if we look at the incentives of these blockchain games, and when they only prioritize earning, essentially, you're going to have these consequences play out in the long term. And when you get these scary statistics come up and get in the way of creating a fun and sustainable economy within these games.
Yeah, that also ties back to kind of the distributing these kind of financial rewards based on participation versus skill. Obviously, there'll be like varying levels of like effort that botters put into like having these bots like perform well in the game, and depends on the game itself. But the more skill based you go, the kind of harder it gets for botters to kind of make up this large portion of the user base and try to extract in that way. But yeah, also important to just try to set up the incentives as well as possible to try to make it less attractive for botters to extract value, because there will be some presence anytime you have kind of these financial aspects, but in some scenarios it might just be the developer's goal is to make their game less attractive to bot than some of their competitors. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done around figuring the best way to do that.
Yep, and I think we're really just in the early stages. So like, of course, since everything's like all jumbled up at the moment, we're still trying to figure out the entire industry, the best practices, and of course there will be some people who would take advantage of it. So that's pretty normal. But then once everything settles down, and like what Kiefer mentioned, more games try to create mechanisms that are not easily bottable, more skill based, making it hard for these developers to create codes that mimic real players, then eventually I think we'll see that number go down.
That makes sense. And I think that leads me perfectly into another question, and that is, what do you guys think about the potential issue of putting a dollar amount on a person's time for grinding in a game? And more specifically, what I mean by that is, we've had this happen before, and we know that this is present in Web 2 games, but we're really taking it to another level through the innovation of blockchain gaming. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this.
For me, I find no issue in that. Basically, it's called work, right? We're just redefining work. And in this particular instance, work is playing a game. So like Web3 and blockchain gaming are redefining what work looks like. But in order to be able to gain value from the ecosystem, value needs to enter first and grow for it to be sustainable. Like you mentioned, it's been existing even before Web3 was Web3, even before crypto was a thing. We have this, at least in the Philippines, we have this concept called pilots. So like in early Web2 gaming, we would pay someone to play and grind our accounts for us while we were in school or in work, basically when we couldn't play. So that's really nothing new, just maybe institutionalized to a certain level or a certain extent because of blockchain technology.
And I would say, so I'd say that this is okay to put a dollar amount on a person's time, but I want to emphasize that it's only in like a very, very specific context here, and that's when there is demand for that activity that they are doing in return for that specific kind of financial reward. And so this needs to be set up really correctly, because I think what we've seen in a lot of games so far is there not really being a constraint on the activity being done that is rewarded. Like with Axie, there wasn't really a constraint on how much people are doing of this certain activity. It's not being tied back to someone's actual demand for whatever it is that they're doing. And to make this kind of a bit more concrete, I can think about an economy where there's like resources that need to be collected in order to create some end asset. Like if someone wants a weapon in the game because they're really interested in just going out and fighting, want to do that as quickly as possible, but they don't want to go and go mine all the base resources needed and do the whole crafting process to put it together. And so it becomes useful to have someone come in, and there's this natural market created where there's someone has money but little time, someone has time but little money, and they can come together for a mutually beneficial transaction. But this doesn't mean that there can be an unlimited number of participants all going out and collecting resources and expecting there to be someone to buy that and expecting to have a financial reward to an unlimited extent. It's very specifically constrained by the demand from these real players. And so this expectation of having the financial reward, it can only really be expected for a fairly small portion of the player base that it 100% needs to be tied to the real demand from these very game-focused players who are willing to spend money on that particular activity.
That's very well said. And so do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think it's really the concept of opportunity cost at the end of the day. Like what Kiefer pointed out about you having the resources but not the time to gather the inputs needed in order to create the weapon that you want. That creates a market, but then the main problem is that the market isn't like the demand for one activity is just limited to a specific set of players, not the entire ecosystem. So it's really how you create the game to target a specific player base or a specific player type that people have to pay attention to.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like to think in terms of opportunity cost for a lot of these things within video games and a lot of the decisions that people make both inside and outside the game as well. So I have a next question, which is a little bit more about thinking about how blockchain gaming works as an industry. So there's a common criticism, well, there are a few common criticisms of blockchain games. One of the criticisms is there's not a real demand for blockchain games, that we don't really need to make the gaming space more financial than it already is. That's a common argument that we hear. So my question is, does it make sense for play and earn games to exist in the first place? And what I mean by that is there an actual demand for gamers to be able to earn some money as they play a game? Because this was not really an existent thing, at least in large, prior to blockchain games. And in addition to that, does it make sense to do, or is this really just a consequence to the hype of play to earn gaming?
Yes, I would say there's, on the kind of demand side, obviously there's demand there. We've seen in Web 2 markets from all the kind of black markets that have sprung up for kind of facilitating these. But then on the supply side as well, as in terms of people being like actually like willing to do these activities, you kind of this an interesting mix of people who are attracted to it. There's some are the gamers who are kind of like willing to do this anyway, and they see this as kind of like this bonus component added on of like, well, I would enjoy playing this game anyway, but I'll also accept some money for this activity. But it does also bring in, like, as we've seen with Axie, some people are coming in purely on the financial side. And so it's going to be important for games to set up some specifications on who they will allow to be kind of the suppliers or the earners in these economies, like who that target audience is. Because tying back to the previous question, there's not infinite demand to be filled here. And so there can only be, or if there's no restriction on how many people can kind of be the suppliers in these markets, then it'll just be a race to the bottom in terms of competing on pricing, essentially down to whatever the lowest minimum wage in whatever country can get access. But so if you have kind of these limitations on who can come in and be the supplier in these markets, then games can maybe target certain groups. And I think they lean towards those that are like that are players that really do enjoy playing the game and see this kind of as an added bonus that they can get some financial incentive on top of that gameplay enjoyment.
Yeah, and in terms of that, I would agree. Yes, there is demand for it, mainly because gamers give demand for it. But that demand isn't unlimited, to Kiefer's point. So this has been existing since the 1990s. So it dates before even popular games like Dota or Counter-Strike. So the demand comes from basically people's opportunity cost of playing the game. So to basically paint a clearer picture. So let's say person A earns like $5 an hour, person B earns 50 from their normal jobs. But earnings from playing a game, it's set at $20. So if you're person A, you would rather play the game because you would earn more money from playing it. But if you're person B, you would rather work your usual job because that pays more, right? So that's the rational thing to do. But if you're person B and you want to play with your friends who are the like person A who grind the game and have high level accounts, of course you would want to play with your friends, right? You have the money to pay for these accounts and play with your friends or compete for the content that only high level accounts have access to. So basically that's where the demand is coming from. And it's been happening through like these black market, gray market platforms that basically the Web 2 games don't want their players engaging with. So Web 3 just made that transaction much more simple by taking out those third-party platforms and introducing ownership through blockchain technology. So in the Web 3 case, people basically will spend time on the game if they're or either earning more by playing it, or it's really a fun game. So I think the latter one is the direction where the industry should and is going at the moment.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think I want to ask another quick question here before we end the discussion today. Some very, 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 very well articulated things said today. I would like to ask, where do you guys foresee the future of token designs being? What token designs will look like 5 years from now in the blockchain gaming space?
Yeah. So in the future, I think as kind of the technology progresses here and there's more exploration around what can be done with blockchain and gaming, I think that we'll see more kind of on-chain and interoperable games. And then connecting that to the token is going to be interesting because you're going to need to set up tokens that can capture the value generated not just from whatever the initially planned gameplay was, but being able to capture the value that's created from all of these things that are iteratively built on top of this kind of base infrastructure. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And also, it's going to be important to look at the regulatory side of things as well, as that's an important constraint of understanding how creatively tokens can be used, especially in the situations where they take on something closer to an equity like aspect in these designs. And so that area might be limited to some extent with ongoing regulatory changes.
Yeah, regulation, I agree, will play a key role in how token designs will develop in the next 5 years. It really depends on country to country and how each regional economy would understand or define the tokens, cryptocurrency, and blockchain games in general. But taking that out of the discussion, like I expect token designs to focus more on NFTs as a way to earn, similar to how it's done in Web 2 in terms of cosmetics, but then people now own these assets. So the narrative is like in the industry right now, it's slowly changing from play to earn to play and own. And I think it will continue to do so within the next 5 years. But I think one interesting thing is that more games would use off-chain utility currencies because mainly everything doesn't have to be on-chain, especially when these currencies could be seen as inflationary. So maybe just keep it off-chain instead, right? And there are some projects that are doing just that. And I think if that bears any fruit in terms of balancing the economy, I think more games would follow in that regard. So yeah, I think we would just continue to iterate on existing models as we're really still in the early stages of the industry, and basically trial and error, find out what works, find out what doesn't, and it's gonna be a trial by fire. It's gonna be interesting to say the least in the next 5 years.
Agreed. Kiefer, is there anything you want to add to that point?
I just really want to echo what you're saying, Enzo, in terms of kind of these mixed economies. I think we're going to see a lot of this kind of combined Web 2 and Web 3 aspects where you'll have a mix of tokens and off-chain currencies, and also like a mix of NFTs and off-chain items. Like you don't have to go all or nothing in terms of these implementations. And often I think having that mix, especially around the NFTs and off-chain items, is important for balancing this kind of asset distribution, especially when you get into items that have in-game utility. So definitely really into seeing more work done on these mixed models.
Yep. Not everything has to be tradable in essence, but it's up to the developers to identify which tokens or assets inside their economy should be tradable. And that's where the market would function and create value or demand for a particular item.
Awesome. So on that note, I'm going to end the discussion for today. Thank you both for joining me for the conversation.
Thanks, Ari. Thanks, Kiefer. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to geek out about economics, about games with you guys, and sharing what basically we do every day, what we learn every day to the greater audience.
So for the audience out there, if there are any specific conversation topics you would like us to chat about, please let us know either in the comments or by sending a message in the Discord chat called Economics Design, which can be found on the Economics Design website.